So it's me, your local friendly Californian author, here to read to you from my book for the masses, The Forgotten Book 1. There will be 3 or 4 books in total, haven't decided yet. By me, Nadia Dorson. And I'm going to read you a little excerpt. Let me set up my camera here. Again, ignore the dead bug and the post that's in the middle of the screen. Let's go to, let's say, chapter 4. I'm going to read to you from chapter 4 to set up the scene. Teal and Azure are twin brother and sister. Teal has just gotten saved. He just found God and Jesus. And his non-Christian twin sister is angry about it. So here we go. Azure didn't need to drag Elena all the way to her mom's house, which was only a few blocks away, but she did anyway. She held on to Elena's hand because she felt she needed control of something, and Elena would do for now. When they got to her house, Elena wiped the moisture off her clammy hand that Azure had held all the way. Elena really didn't appreciate Azure's immature actions, but she knew her friend was feeling vulnerable and needed her emotionally, and whenever Azure was feeling vulnerable, she got aggressive. Azure busted through the door shouting, "Mom, are you home?" Mrs. Hines sauntered down the stairs, a glass of red wine in her hand. "Jackie Jr., please don't shout. I have a terrible headache." Azure rolled her eyes, biting her tongue. She was already furious, and her drunk mother was just adding to her agitation. She wanted to tell her mom that a hangover and a headache were 2 completely different things, but she didn't. At this point, she needed her mother as an ally. She needed someone to commiserate with over the loss of Teal to some absurd madness. Elena hung back by the door, always a bit nervous in the Hines household. The air was always so thick with animosity, especially now since Mr. Hines was gone. Something else was hanging in the air. Was it sadness? Elena got lost in her thoughts as she tried to think of what the house felt like now. While Azure told her mom about what happened over at Nora's house with Teal and Emily. No, it wasn't sadness. It was lifeless. The house felt like a ghost within itself. "Don't you agree, Elena?" "Elena?" Azure shouted at her. "Oh, what? Sorry, what did you say?" "Don't you agree that what happened over at Nora's is fucked up?" Mrs. Hines bopped Azure on the back of the head. "Watch your language, Missy." Mrs. Hines turned to Elena. "I'm sorry, Elena. I apologize for my daughter's rude behavior." She slurred as she took another sip of wine. Elena thought it was far ruder to hit Azure and be drunk in front of them, but she minded her own business. Mrs. Hines was a scary lady. "Mom, what are we going to do about Teal?" "What do you mean?" "Teal believes in a freaking magician. Talk some sense into him, Mom." Azure went into one of her perfect pouts, something she learned from watching her idol Sasha do time and time again. Mrs. Hines pulled her daughter to her for a hug. "No, Azure, if Teal has found faith, who are we to take it from him?" Her words were compassionate, but her eyes were as cold as ice. "Yeah, Azure, who are we to take it from him?" This from Elena, right when Azure was starting to enjoy being in her mom's arms. Elena's co-signing had put such a rage in her that she pushed away from her mother and got in Elena's face and shouted, "You don't know Teal. You think you do, but you don't. Teal is like me. We believe in one thing, us. Just because you think you're in love with him doesn't mean that you know him. Shut up, Elena. Just go home." "Oh, wait." Azure tilted her head to the side, pretending to be shocked. "You have no home," she said venomously in Elena's face. She backed away when she saw Elena's hurt look, and Azure turned haughty and pleased with herself, a character trait she got from her evil mother. After Azure had reveled in Elena's pain for a minute, she ran upstairs to her bedroom, slamming the door so loud it reverberated through the entire house, making Elena jump. "Another Azure storm. This one wasn't so bad. Didn't need to take cover," said Mrs. Hines, lifting her glass to her lips, then stopped mid-lift and slurred, "Well, you needed to take cover." She laughed a drunken laugh. She looked at Elena with pity. "Don't worry. Azure's storm will blow over. It always does for those she loves." Elena turned away from Mrs. Hines. She never felt so unwelcome and cold in her life. What Azure had said to her truly hurt her. Azure had always let loose her venom on others, never on her or Teal. Their bond was too tight, or so she thought. Elena began to walk away and fixed her feet to head back to Nora's house, where she heard Mrs. Hines say, "I know what you are, little girl." Elena stopped dead in her tracks, chills running down her spine. Mrs. Hines sauntered behind Elena and whispered in her ear from behind, "Everyone thinks that you're in love with my son Jackson, but don't think for 1 second that I don't know who you really always come here for." Even though her words were slurred, they were sharp and cut through Elena's heart. "Come on, darling. I see the way you look at my daughter." Mrs. Hines took another drink and whispered into the lip of the glass, "It's the same way you look at my son." She backed off Elena's ear, pleased that the girl was frozen still in fear. "Run along to my son and act like the perfect little fake Christian. Don't you know real Christian girls aren't attracted to other girls? Silly little fool. Teal may think he's found faith, but it won't last. Azure has her hooks in him far deeper than any Christ. Their blood bond will bring him back," Mrs. Hines said nastily, then took a sip of her wine. "He can't do anything without Jackie Jr. Once he's realized he's lost his sister, Jackson will drop Jesus like a bad habit. He's lost without his sister." Elena was silent. She walked over to the door, eager to get out. She put her hand on the doorknob. Something inside her gave her courage. Maybe it was rage, maybe it was something else, but she found it in her to say out loud without turning around, "You're wrong. It's Azure who is lost without Teal." Elena opened the door to the night sky and left the spiritless house of sad females who had lost their men to Christ. So that is the end of that scene. Once again, my book is called For the Masses, The Forgotten. And if you look for it on Amazon, you won't find it because of the algorithms pull up every other book but mine. But if you type in my name, Nadia Durison, my name will pull up and you can purchase my book. Hopefully you do. Hope you enjoy. Bless ya.